So how does one factory closure trigger an international trade showdown? And not just any showdown, but one that completely reshapes the entire North American auto industry? Well, that's exactly what we're diving into.
It all starts right here, with a single brutal sentence. A decision made in a boardroom, probably hundreds of miles away, that lit a fuse and set off a chain reaction that, well, nobody saw coming.
So, to really get how this all went down, here's our game plan. We're going to start with the betrayal that kicked this whole thing off. Then, we'll see how Ottawa drew a line in the sand, creating this whole new BuyCanadian mindset. From there, we'll look at the strain on the US-Canada relationship, this kind of feedback loop of failure that nobody wanted, and finally, how it literally redrew the economic map of North America.
All right, let's get into it. Our story kicks off in a town in Ontario, and for the people there, a decision made by a massive corporation felt like nothing short of a profound betrayal.
And here's where things get really interesting. You've got two completely different stories. On one side, you have General Motors saying, hey, this is just corporate efficiency. Demand for these electric vans is weak, so we're making a tough call. But on the other side, for Canada, for those workers, this was a flat-out betrayal, an abandonment of their commitments.
And you know, this really gets to the heart of why this stung so badly. We're not talking about just any company here. This is GM. A corporation that Canadian taxpayers helped bail out with billions of dollars back during the 2008 financial crisis. So the feeling was, we were there for you when you needed us, and now you're just walking away?
Well, that feeling of betrayal, it triggered a response from the government that was, let's just say, not business as usual. It was immediate and it was forceful.
And right at the center of it was Industry Minister Mélanie Joly. This quote says it all. This wasn't the usual quiet, behind-the-scenes diplomacy. No way. This was a public ultimatum. She was basically saying, we're going to fight for these workers. We were there for you, GM, and now it's your turn to be there for us.
The message coming out of Ottawa couldn't have been clearer. And it wasn't just for GM either. It was for the entire auto industry. That old dynamic, where Canada just kind of quietly takes the hit from decisions made in the US, yeah, that was officially over. And these weren't just empty words. They backed it up with some serious economic muscle. Check this out. The government went ahead and slashed the number of cars GM and Stellantis could import tariff-free. Why Stellantis too? Well, they'd also been pulling back in Canada. The message was crystal clear. If you're going to build less here, you're going to pay more to sell here. Simple as that. And this is the really clever part. Think about it. This wasn't a sledgehammer approach, like slapping a giant tariff on everything, which can hurt everyone. This was surgical. It's a policy that says your access to our market is now directly tied to how much you invest and build in our country. It was a pretty sophisticated way of saying the ball's in your court.
And just to prove how serious they were, Minister Joly didn't just ask for some vague promises about the future. Oh no, she put a clock on it. She gave GM 15 days. 15 days to come up with a specific plan for a new model at that Cami plant. The pressure was absolutely on.
Okay, so let's zoom out for a second, because what was happening with GM wasn't just a one-off fight. It was actually a sign of a much, much bigger shift in Canada's entire economic strategy.
They started calling it the BuyCanadian doctrine, and it wasn't just a nice-sounding slogan. They put some serious cash behind it, an initial $186 million to get this new, more Canada-first economic framework off the ground. So, what did this new framework actually do? Well, it basically boiled down to three main things. First, the government itself would start prioritizing Canadian suppliers for its own contracts. Makes sense, right? Second, they set up a fund to help crucial sectors, like steel and aluminum, whenever they got hit by foreign tariffs. And third, and this is the really ambitious part, they decided to build a completely homegrown EV supply chain, right from the minerals in the ground to the finished car rolling off the line. I mean, this was a total change in mindset. For decades, Canada had been playing defense, just reacting to whatever trade policies the US came up with. The new idea was to go on offense, to basically say, okay, if those are the tools Washington is going to use, we're going to pick them up and use them for our own priorities. And to really understand why Canada felt it had to make this huge shift, you have to look south of the border. You have to look at the policies that kind of blew up the old stable way of doing things.
So the Trump administration announced a whole new wave of heavy tariffs on things like cars, steel, you name it. And the rhetoric was huge, right? It was about a liberation day to restore industrial glory to the United States.
That was the promise. But look at the reality. The numbers tell a completely different story. Instead of an industrial boom, North American auto output actually went down by 20,000 vehicles a day. Auto stocks took a nosedive. Manufacturing job growth stalled. And who paid the price? The American consumer, with car prices jumping by as much as 25%.
And for Canada, watching all this unfold, this was the breaking point. This wasn't just another trade tiff. This was the moment Ottawa realized that the old rulebook had been thrown out. They just couldn't rely on their biggest trading partner to be predictable anymore. That strategy was dead.
So what you ended up with is this bizarre feedback loop of failure, where all these policies designed to protect one country's industry ended up backfiring and hurting that very same country.
It's a pretty clear cause and effect chain when you lay it out. In April, the tariffs are announced. A few months later, the supply chains across North America start to get messy. Fast forward to today, prices are way up on popular cars, and surprise, surprise, sales start to fall. So the end result? U.S. consumers and car dealers are the ones facing higher costs and empty lots.
And for GM, the irony here is just incredible. They closed the Canadian plant, trying to be more efficient, right? But in doing so, they literally broke a key link in their own U.S. supply chain. Suddenly, dealers in Michigan and Ohio are screaming about delays and part shortages. So what does GM do? They have to import more from Asia to fill the gap. And what happens to those Asian imports? Bam! They get hit by those new U.S. tariffs. It's just a cascade of self-inflicted wounds. And we're not talking about small potatoes here. The overall economic damage is just staggering. Industry forecasts are warning that if these tariffs stick around, the North American auto market could shrink by 1.8 million vehicles this year. That is a massive, massive hit for everyone.
So, where does this all leave us? What does it all mean for the future? Well, what we're witnessing, really, is the economic map of North America being permanently redrawn.
Canada's big picture plan is to finally move beyond what they used to call a branch plant economy. You know, the idea that Canada was just a convenient place for foreign companies to set up an assembly line. The new goal is totally different, to build an integrated, self-reliant industrial base, one that connects its own critical minerals, its own clean energy, and its own advanced manufacturing.
And you can see what that looks like in practice right here. A huge chunk of the focus is now on domestic supply chains. Yeah, the U.S. is still a huge partner, but the relationship is different. It's on new terms. And at the same time, Canada is looking elsewhere, actively building stronger trade ties with places like South Korea, Japan, and the EU. So it really boils down to this. The old reality? Canada was the quiet junior partner in North America. The new reality? Canada is an assertive player, one that's writing its own rules and using its own market as leverage to get what it wants, respect and investment.
And it all kind of leaves you with this one big question, right? When a major trading partner just stops playing by the old rules, who gets to write the new ones? This whole episode shows that maybe, just maybe, it's not always the biggest player at the table.